You know you were an accident, right? I wanted a son. My father said that to my face in front of 31 relatives, 6 Budweisers deep. Standing on the lawn, my mother planted every hydrangea bush by hand. The smoke from his new Weber grill curled up behind him like a halo he didn't deserve. Aunt Carol dropped her paper plate. Potato salad hit the grass. 31 heads turned. Nobody breathed. I didn't flinch. I said, "Funny. Mom told me something different before she died." "Want me to read her letter?" His hand started shaking. That letter held a truth my father had buried for 30 years. And it didn't just ruin his 4th of July. It undid every lie he'd ever told about my mother, about me, and about whose name was really on the deed to the house he called his. Before I go on, please take a moment to like and subscribe, but only if you genuinely connect with this story. And wherever you are right now, drop your location and local time in the comments. I'd love to know who's listening. My name is Myra. I'm 28. I'm an ICU nurse. Now let me take you back 3 years before that 4th of July, to the day my mom got her diagnosis. The house on Maple Lane was a white colonial with green shutters and a wraparound porch that creaked in 3 places my mother knew by heart. She'd step over the 2nd and 3rd boards every morning when she went out to water her hydrangeas, barefoot, before my father woke up. She moved through that house like someone trying not to be heard. I grew up thinking that was normal. My father, Rex Harper, had a leather lazy boy recliner in the living room, dark brown, cracked at the armrests, positioned dead center facing the television. Nobody sat in it. Not my mother. Not me. Not even Uncle Bill when he visited. It was understood. That chair was his throne, and the rest of us arranged ourselves around it. He controlled everything. The thermostat. 68 in winter, 76 in summer, and if you touched it, God help you. The remote, the grocery list, the dinner schedule. My mother cooked what he wanted, when he wanted it, and cleared the plates before he had to ask. She never had her own bank account. Her name wasn't on the checking account. She'd ask him for grocery money each Monday morning, and he'd pull bills from his wallet one at a time, counting them out loud like she was a cashier making change. I didn't realize that wasn't how other families worked until I was about 14 and spent a weekend at my friend's house and watched her mother swipe a credit card at Target without calling anyone first. The house itself was beautiful. My mother made it that way. The window boxes, the herb garden along the south wall, the porch swing she'd found at an estate sale. She poured everything she couldn't say out loud into that house. And my father called it his. My roof. My rules. He'd say, if either of us had an opinion. You don't like it, there's the door. I didn't know yet what I'd eventually learn, that the roof wasn't his at all. Rex Harper was not a complicated man. He believed 3 things with absolute certainty: that he was the head of the household, that women had supporting roles, and that anyone who challenged either point was disrespectful. "What do women know?" was his refrain. He said it at dinner when my mother suggested they refinance. He said it at Thanksgiving when his cousin Linda brought up politics. He said it to me when I told him I'd been accepted into the nursing program at State. "Nursing, so you'll be emptying bedpans. Great career for a girl, I guess." My mother never argued. When he raised his voice, she'd go still, shoulders pulled in, hands folded in her lap, eyes on the tablecloth. I used to think she was being patient. I understand now she was being safe. There was one night I can't shake. I was 16. He'd come home from work in a mood. Something about a parts order going wrong at the store, and he started in on me. My grades, my friends, the length of my shorts. His voice filled the kitchen like a pressure system. I stood at the counter, gripping the edge, refusing to cry, and I saw my mother. She was sitting at the table behind him, and for just a second, half a second, her shoulders dropped. Her breath came out. Relief. Because it was me, not her. Then her eyes met mine, and the relief turned into something I didn't have a word for until I was much older. Guilt. Deep, corrosive guilt. That night she came to my room after he'd fallen asleep in his recliner. She sat on the edge of my bed and whispered, "I'm sorry I can't protect you the way I should." I told her it was fine. It wasn't. The call came on a Tuesday in March. I'd just finished my clinical rotation, 12 hours on my feet in the step-down unit, and I was sitting in my Honda Civic in the hospital parking lot with a cold coffee in the cup holder when my mother's name lit up my phone. Pancreatic cancer. Stage 3. She said it the way she said everything difficult. Quietly, like she was apologizing for the inconvenience. "The doctor says we should talk about treatment options. I didn't want to bother you during your shift." I drove straight home. 2 hours on the interstate with both hands white-knuckled on the wheel. When I got there, my father was in the garage, not with her. In the garage, the door half open, a Budweiser on the workbench, polishing the chrome on his Dodge Ram. He polished that truck every Saturday like it owed him something, never missed a week. But in the 14 months of my mother's chemo and radiation, he did not drive her to the hospital once. Not one single time. I did. Every Tuesday and every other Thursday. I'd pick her up in my Civic, help her into the passenger seat, hold a plastic bag in my lap in case the nausea hit before we got there. I'd sit in the waiting room reading pharmacology notes while they dripped poison into her veins, and then I'd drive her home, help her to bed, and leave a glass of ginger ale on the nightstand. My father's contribution was to complain that dinner was late. During those months, something shifted between my mother and Aunt Carol. Phone calls got longer. Sometimes I'd walk into the kitchen and my mom would lower her voice and say, "I'll call you back, Carol," then smile at me like nothing was happening. I figured they were just being sisters. I had no idea they were building something. My mother died on a Sunday in October. The hospice nurse said it was peaceful, and I believed her, because I was holding my mother's hand when it happened, and I felt the exact moment she stopped gripping back. My father was downstairs watching football. I handled the funeral, the phone calls, the flowers, the obituary in the county paper. Rex sat in his recliner and told people he was too broken up to function, and they believed him because he'd perfected the role of grieving husband the way some men perfect a golf swing, with practice and no actual feeling underneath. 5 months later, he introduced Donna. She showed up at a Sunday dinner wearing a white cashmere sweater and heels that clicked on my mother's hardwood floors. She sat in my mother's chair at the table, the one nearest the kitchen, the one my mother had sat in for 30 years, and Rex didn't even blink. He carved the roast like it was a celebration. Donna Kessler, 40, real estate agent, blonde highlights and a smile that calculated square footage. After dinner, Rex slid a manila folder across the table to me. "Just some administrative paperwork for your mom's estate. Lawyer stuff. Sign where the tabs are, and we'll be done with it." I was exhausted. I was grieving. I was 25 years old and I'd just spent 14 months watching my mother disappear. I signed most of the pages without reading them. There were about 8 or 9 forms. I got through 6 or 7, and then my pager went off. Night shift. ICU. A patient coding. I left the last pages unsigned and told him I'd finish next week. One of those unsigned pages was a quitclaim deed. I didn't know it then. The expired power of attorney form I'd signed by accident? It was already void. Rex just didn't realize it. Rex didn't waste time. Within weeks of that dinner, the phone calls started. But not to me. To everyone else. Uncle Bill got the first one. Then Cousin Patty. Then the neighbors on Maple Lane. Then the women at my mother's old church group. Rex's version of the story went like this. His daughter, whom he'd raised and sacrificed everything for, had abandoned him in his grief. Wouldn't call. Wouldn't visit. Wouldn't even come to dinner. The truth was, I worked 4 night shifts a week and spent my days off sleeping or crying in my apartment. But truth doesn't travel as fast as a victim story told by a man with a deep voice and good timing. Uncle Bill texted me on a Wednesday night at 11 p.m., right after I'd lost a patient. My hands still smelled like nitrile gloves. The message read, "Your dad is alone, Myra. He lost his wife. Don't be selfish." Then a follow-up 2 minutes later, a link to an article titled, "When Adult Children Abandon Aging Parents, a Growing Crisis." I stared at my phone in the break room and felt something I hadn't felt since I was 16. That old, familiar shrinking, like I was the problem. I typed a response. Deleted it. Typed another. Deleted that too. What do you say to an uncle who's known you your whole life, but has never once asked for your side of the story? I called Uncle Bill the next morning and tried to explain. The shifts, the exhaustion, the fact that Rex had never once visited me. Bill listened for about 45 seconds and then said, "He's your father, Myra. You only get one." After that, I stopped trying to explain. There's a difference between people who don't understand and people who don't want to. I didn't know yet that Rex was building toward something specific. That the Whisper campaign wasn't grief. It was strategy. I went back to the house on Maple Lane in April to pick up a box of my mother's things I'd left in the upstairs closet. Old photo albums, mostly, and a scarf that still smelled like her Chanel No. 5. The front door was unlocked. I let myself in and stopped 3 steps past the threshold. The living room looked the same. Rex's lazy boy, the TV on mute, beer cans on the side table. But something was different in the air. A different perfume. Something sweet and synthetic. I went upstairs. My parents' bedroom door was open. The wedding photo that had hung above the dresser for as long as I could remember. My mother in a simple ivory dress, laughing, her hand on my father's chest, was gone. The nail was still in the wall. In its place, Donna had hung a framed print of a beach sunset. My mother's vanity, the oak one with the oval mirror, the one she'd sit at every morning to put on her lipstick even when she was too sick to leave the house, was covered in Donna's things. Brushes, compacts, a bottle of Victoria's Secret body mist where my mother's Chanel No. 5 used to be. Donna appeared from the master bathroom in a terrycloth robe, toweling her hair. She looked at me without surprise. "Oh, your dad said you wouldn't mind." I heard Rex's voice from the bottom of the stairs. "Myra, quit snooping. This isn't your room anymore." I almost left. Almost just took my box and drove away. But I passed through the living room on the way out. And there on the coffee table, tucked under a TV guide, was a folder with a real estate logo on it, Donna's agency. Inside, a comparable market analysis for 414 Maple Lane. Estimated value, $280,000. He wasn't just moving on from my mother. He was selling her house. That was the first time I thought, he's not just cruel. He's planning something. 2 weeks later, Rex called me. First time in months he'd dialed my number instead of Uncle Bill's. "Come to dinner Friday," he said. "Donna's making pot roast." The invitation alone should have been a red flag. My father had never once asked me to dinner. He announced it or he expected it. But he didn't ask. I went anyway. The table was set for 3. Donna had put out cloth napkins and a candle. Staging, I realized later, like she was showing a house. The pot roast was fine, the wine was cheap. My father was on his best behavior, which meant he only interrupted me twice. After the plates were cleared, Rex reached behind his chair and produced another manila folder. Same kind as before. He placed it between us on the table, square to the edge, like it was nothing. "The lawyer said we missed one form from last time. Just transfers the property title into my name for estate management. Standard stuff." I opened the folder. 1 page. The heading read, "Quitclaim deed." Below it, in plain language, transfer of all right, title, and interest in the real property at 414 Maple Lane from estate of Ellen Whitmore Harper to Rex A. Harper. I read it twice. Donna appeared at my elbow with a pen. "It's really standard, Myra. I see these all the time in real estate." I looked at my father. He was watching me with that expression I'd seen 1,000 times, the one that meant do what I say and don't ask questions. "I need to have my own lawyer look at this," I said. His jaw tightened. "Lawyer? You don't trust your own father?" "If it's just paperwork," I said, "then there's no rush. I'll have someone look at it." I took the quitclaim deed, put it in my bag, and drove straight to Aunt Carol's house. Carol Whitmore lived in a brick ranch house 12 miles outside of town, the kind of place that smelled like coffee and tax returns. She was a CPA, had been for 25 years, and her kitchen table had seen more W-2s than family dinners. She opened the door before I knocked, like she'd been expecting me. I put the quitclaim deed on her oak kitchen table. The same table, I would later learn, where she and my mother had sat 2 years before my mother died, signing documents of their own. Carol picked up the form. Read it once. Her face went still. Not surprised. Something worse. Confirmed. He's trying to take the house, she said. Then she looked at me. Myra, the house was never his. She said it simply, the way she said everything. Carol didn't do drama, she did facts. Your mother bought that house with inheritance money from your grandparents, the Whitmores, $180,000. The deed is in her name, Ellen Whitmore Harper. Rex's name is not on it. It was never on it. I stared at her. 30 years my father had called that house his. 30 years, Carol continued. Your mother made a will, a real one, with a lawyer, Richard Avery, downtown. The house goes to you. It's already been through probate. It's yours, Myra. It's been yours since your mother died. I couldn't speak. Carol gave me a moment. Then she stood, walked to the filing cabinet in her home office, and came back with a sealed envelope. Cream-colored, my mother's handwriting on the front, in her careful cursive, for Myra, when she's ready. Your mother left this too, Carol said. She told me to give it to you when you needed it. I think you need it. I held the envelope with both hands. Read it when you're ready, Carol said. But don't read it alone. I didn't open it that night. I sat in my car in Carol's driveway for 20 minutes, engine off, holding the letter my mother had written for me from the other side of death, and I thought about every time my father had said my house, my rules, and how my mother must have sat there listening, knowing the truth, saying nothing. She couldn't fight him while she was alive, so she fought him on paper. The next morning, I called the law office of Richard Avery. His receptionist put me through in under a minute, which told me he'd been briefed. He had a calm, deliberate voice, the kind of man who read every line before signing anything, which was exactly what my mother had needed. Ms. Harper, I've been expecting your call, honestly, for about a year now. He confirmed everything Carol had told me. The will was valid. It had been filed, entered into probate, and executed. The house at 414 Maple Lane, deed recorded under Ellen Whitmore Harper, had transferred to me upon my mother's death as the sole named beneficiary. The paperwork was clean. The title was clear. Your father has no legal claim to the property, Avery said. He can reside there as a guest, but he cannot sell it, cannot mortgage it, and cannot transfer title without your signature on a quitclaim deed. Which, I assume, is why you're calling. I told him about the form Rex had handed me. Avery paused. Then, I should tell you something else. About 18 months ago, before your mother passed, a loan officer at First Regional contacted me because someone had applied for a second mortgage on 414 Maple Lane. The applicant was Rex Harper. The bank flagged it because his name wasn't on the deed. They denied the application. My stomach dropped. Your mother found out, Avery said. That's when she called Carol. That's when we finalized the will and set up the trust. The trust. I hadn't even gotten to that part yet. $220,000, Avery said. Held in a revocable trust, naming you as beneficiary. Funded from your mother's separate inheritance. Mr. Harper has no access and no knowledge of its current balance. I sat in my apartment, the phone pressed to my ear, doing the math my mother had done when she was dying. A week later, Rex called again. 4th of July BBQ, he said. Whole family's coming. Bring that paperwork signed. I told him I'd be there. But I wasn't bringing his paperwork. I was bringing my mother's. 4th of July on Maple Lane looked like a postcard. My father had gone all out. Or rather, his credit card had. A brand new Weber Genesis grill sat on the patio like a chrome altar, still wearing its price tag tan line where the sticker had been peeled off that morning. Red, white, and blue bunting hung from the porch rails. A folding table ran the length of the backyard, covered in a checkered cloth, weighed down with coleslaw and corn and coolers of Bud Light. 31 people. I counted when I arrived. Uncle Bill and his wife Linda, holding court near the potato salad. Cousin Patty with her 3 kids chasing sparklers across the grass. Rex's co-worker friends from the auto parts store. Neighbors. Church people. The full arsenal of social pressure assembled on lawn chairs and picnic blankets under a cloudless sky. And Donna, standing at the head of the table in a white sundress and new sandals, holding a glass of Prosecco, laughing at something Uncle Bill said, playing the hostess in my mother's yard beside my mother's hydrangeas, under the string lights my mother had hung 3 summers ago. I came straight from a 12-hour shift. I was still wearing my scrubs. Seal blue, wrinkled at the knees, my badge clipped to my chest. I hadn't changed on purpose. Those scrubs were the only honest thing I could put on that day. Every person there knew what I did for a living. Every person there knew I'd been the one at my mother's bedside. The scrubs were my quiet reminder. Aunt Carol was already seated near the back, a paper plate balanced on her knee, sunglasses on. When I walked through the side gate, her eyes found mine immediately. She gave me one small nod. I had the envelope in my scrub pocket. Beside it, a folded copy of the will, notarized, and a printout of the recorded deed. My father saw me arrive. He saw my empty hands. No manila folder, no signed form. His smile stayed in place, but something behind his eyes went flat. "There she is," he announced to the yard. "I told her to come. She finally listens." By 5 o'clock, Rex was 6 beers in. I know because I watched him drink each one. It's a reflex from the ICU. You count inputs and outputs. You track vitals. You note the moment a patient crosses a threshold. My father crossed his threshold around beer number 4, when his voice shifted from conversational to performance. He'd positioned himself near the grill, the center of gravity, where people came to him. He flipped burgers with one hand and gestured with the Budweiser in the other, telling stories louder than they needed to be told. Old stories. Stories about his glory days managing the store, about the truck he'd restored in 2004, about the time he'd told off a county inspector. Man stories. The kind that started with I and ended with everyone else being wrong. Around beer 5, he started in on family. "You know," he said, loud enough for the nearest cluster of lawn chairs to hear. "I always thought I'd have a boy. Somebody to take over. Teach him the business, pass something down." He shook his head, smiling like he was telling a joke. Didn't work out that way. A few people chuckled politely. Donna refilled his cooler from behind, sliding another can into his hand like she was loading a weapon. Uncle Bill leaned in from his Adirondack chair. "Yeah, a son would have been something." I was sitting at the far end of the table, on one of those low aluminum folding chairs, the kind they keep stacked in garages for overflow guests. It put me about 6 inches below everyone else. I ate my potato salad slowly and I didn't respond. Rex looked over at me. I saw it happen. The way a drunk man talks himself into something. He straightened up. He cleared his throat. He took a long pull of beer number 6. And then he said it. "You know you were an accident, right?" He said it standing. He said it facing me. He said it at a volume that cut through every side conversation, every child's laugh, every pop of a distant firecracker. "I wanted a son." The yard went silent the way a room goes silent when glass breaks. Not gradually, but all at once, like someone had pulled the plug on the noise. 31 people, every single one of them looking at me. My Aunt Carol's paper plate hit the ground. Potato salad, a scoop of coleslaw, a deviled egg. All of it in the grass. She didn't pick it up. She just stood there, her hand still in the shape of holding something. Rex wasn't done. "But your mother insisted on keeping you." He tilted his beer toward me like a pointer. "And look how you turned out. A nurse who can't even afford her own apartment." Somebody's kid asked for a sparkler. Nobody answered. Then Donna stepped forward from behind Rex, and I saw what she was carrying. The manila folder, the quitclaim deed, and a pen. A silver ballpoint, expensive looking, the kind agents give clients at closings. "Honey," Donna said, her voice dropping into that soothing register real estate agents use when they want you to ignore the foundation cracks. Your dad just needs you to sign this so he can take care of the house. It's what your mom would have wanted. She placed the folder and the pen on the table in front of me, right next to my paper plate, like it was dessert. Rex turned to the crowd. This is a family matter, he said. My daughter's been difficult about some basic estate paperwork. I just need a signature. That's it. Uncle Bill, from his chair. Just sign it, kid. Don't make this harder than it needs to be. A woman I barely recognized, some second cousin of my father's, murmured, Poor Rex. He just wants to keep the house. 31 pairs of eyes. Some sympathetic, some uncomfortable, some looking at their shoes. I looked at the pen. I looked at the paper. I looked at my father, standing in the yard my mother had planted, wearing the confidence of a man who had never once been told no by the women in his life. And I felt the envelope in my scrub pocket, pressing against my ribs like a second heartbeat. I picked up the pen. I need you to understand. I picked it up. I held it between my fingers and I looked at the line where my name was supposed to go, and for one terrible second I understood my mother completely. Because this is what it feels like. This is what she lived with every single day. The weight of 31 stairs. The math your body does before your brain catches up. If I just sign, this stops. If I just agree, the silence goes away. If I just give him what he wants, I can leave and breathe and never think about this table again. I understood in that moment how my mother had spent 30 years saying yes to a man who never deserved it. Not because she was weak, because the cost of no was a room full of people deciding you were the problem. Rex watched me hold that pen, and I saw it. A flicker of victory in his eyes. He thought he had me. He thought the pressure and the crowd and the beer-soaked cruelty had done what it always did. Don't embarrass me in front of the whole family, Myra, he said, quieter now, leaning in. Almost gentle. The way he'd say it to my mother when she hesitated. A cousin shifted in his lawn chair. Someone's toddler whined. The charcoal in the grill popped. I held that pen for 5 full seconds. And then I put it down. I set it on the table, parallel to the quitclaim deed, precisely and deliberately, the way I set instruments on a surgical tray. No. One word. No volume behind it. No tremor. Just the flattest, cleanest syllable I'd ever spoken. Rex blinked. Excuse me. I'm not signing this. Not today. Not ever. The yard stayed silent, but the quality of the silence changed, from shock to something else. Anticipation. My father's face went the color of the charcoal in his grill. Not red with embarrassment. Red with fury. The kind I knew from childhood. The kind that used to make my mother disappear into the kitchen and close the door softly behind her. You ungrateful. He caught himself. Recalibrated. Looked at the crowd, then back at me. You're just like your mother. Useless and stubborn. He said it louder than he needed to, because Rex always needed witnesses when he was right. Your mother didn't leave anything behind worth talking about. A vanity table and some dead flowers. That's her legacy. And you, he jabbed a finger in my direction. You're standing here making a scene because you can't bring yourself to do one simple thing for the man who raised you. Donna touched his arm. Rex, maybe we should... Quiet. He shook her off without looking at her. Donna's hand dropped. She took a half step back. Uncle Bill sat motionless in his Adirondack chair. Cousin Patty pulled her youngest onto her lap. A neighbor I'd known since childhood found something fascinating in his coleslaw. Rex wasn't done. He never was. He'd built a lifetime on having the last word, and he must have felt it slipping, because what he said next was the thing he should never have said. He looked right at me, and his voice dropped to that register, the one that pretended to be calm, but was really just cruelty in a lower key. Your mother was too weak to do anything right, including raising you. The yard was so quiet I could hear the flag snapping on the pole 2 houses down. That was the line. Not what he'd said about me. I could carry that. I'd been carrying it for 28 years. But he said it about her. The woman who spent her last months alive making sure I'd be standing exactly here. Exactly now. With exactly what I needed. He said it about my mother. And something in me locked into place. I stood up. Not fast. Not angry. I stood up the way I stand up at a patient's bedside when their vitals are crashing. Steady, controlled, already 3 steps ahead. I pushed the quitclaim deed across the table toward Rex. The paper slid over the checkered cloth and stopped against a bowl of baked beans. "I'm not signing this," I said. "Not today, not ever." Rex's mouth opened. For a man who always had something to say, he suddenly looked like he was buffering. "And I'd be careful about what you say next about my mother." His eyes narrowed. "Or what?" I reached into the chest pocket of my scrubs, the one over my heart, where I usually kept a penlight, and I pulled out a cream-colored envelope, handwritten, sealed until 2 nights ago, when I'd finally opened it at Aunt Carol's kitchen table with a cup of tea and a box of tissues. I held it up so the whole yard could see it. "Funny," I said. "Mom told me something different before she died." Rex's eyes locked on the envelope. I could see him trying to calculate. What was it? What did she write? What could she possibly have said? "Want me to read her letter?" The yard held its breath. Rex's right hand, the one holding the Budweiser, started to tremble. Not a lot. Just enough. The aluminum can made a tiny crinkling sound in the silence. He knew. He didn't know what was in it. But he knew his wife. And he knew that a woman who'd been silent for 30 years doesn't write a letter unless she has something to say. I didn't wait for permission. I slid my finger under the flap. It had already been opened and resealed with a piece of tape from the night I'd first read it at Carol's, and I unfolded the pages. 3 sheets of cream stationery, front and back, in my mother's careful cursive. The handwriting was steady. Not the handwriting of a sick woman. Not yet. Rex took a step toward me. "Give me that. Whatever your mother wrote, she wasn't in her right. She wrote this 2 years before the diagnosis, Rex." That was Aunt Carol. She hadn't moved from her spot near the back, but her voice carried across the yard like it had been waiting for this exact frequency. "I was there when she wrote it. I watched her sign it." Uncle Bill turned in his chair. "Carol? What's going on?" Carol didn't answer him. She was looking at Rex. Rex stopped walking. He looked from Carol to me, then to the letter, then back to Carol. His tongue moved across his lower lip. A nervous habit I'd noticed 1,000 times, always just before he lied. "This is ridiculous," he said. "Ellen didn't—" "You had your speech, Dad." I kept my voice flat. I see you flat. The voice I use when a family member is screaming and I need them to hear me without raising my volume. "Now it's Mom's turn." Donna stood 3 feet behind Rex, clutching her Prosecco glass with both hands. She looked like a woman watching the open house fall through. I looked down at the first page. A breeze came through the yard. Warm, smelling like charcoal and cut grass and someone's sparklers. And it fluttered the edges of the stationery in my hands. 31 people leaned forward without realizing it. I began to read. "My sweet Myra," I read aloud, and my voice only broke on the second word. I swallowed it down, the way I've learned to swallow things down in rooms full of people who need me steady. "If you're reading this, I'm not there anymore, and I'm sorry. Not for dying, for all the years I was alive and didn't say what I should have said." The yard was so still I could hear the ice shifting in the coolers. I kept reading. "Your father told you, told everyone, that you were an accident. That he wanted a son. He's said it so many times that I think he believes it now, but I need you to know the truth. Because the truth is the only thing I have left to give you." Rex said, "Myra, that's enough." I didn't look up. "I wanted you, Myra. I wanted you more than I have ever wanted anything. I spent 2 years in a fertility clinic, 2 years of progesterone injections every week, blood draws every month, appointments I drove to alone because your father said it was a waste of money. He didn't want a child. Not a son, not a daughter. He said we couldn't afford it. He said he wasn't ready. He said," and these are his exact words, "Kids are a money pit. I'd rather buy a boat." A ripple went through the crowd. Cousin Patty put her hand over her mouth. Uncle Bill sat forward in his chair. "When I finally got pregnant, I continued. He said, "Fine. But if it's not a boy, don't expect me to be excited." And then you came. You came. And you were everything. I paused. Breathed. Rex's face was a color I'd never seen before. Not anger. Not embarrassment. Something underneath both. Something old. "He told everyone you were an accident," I read, because the truth embarrassed him. That a man who called himself the head of the house had to be begged by his wife to become a father. That he fought it every step of the way. That he only agreed because I told him I'd leave if he said no one more time. Carol spoke from the back of the yard. Quiet. Final. "She wrote this 2 years before the diagnosis, Rex." She wasn't confused. She wasn't medicated. She was clear. Rex said nothing. His 6th Budweiser hung at his side, forgotten, dripping condensation onto his shoe. Rex moved. It was fast. The lunge of a man who'd spent his whole life being the one who decided when a conversation was over. He crossed the 2 steps between us and reached for the letter, hand open, fingers grasping. "Give me that." Jake Whitmore stood up from the picnic bench. 25 years old, Carol's son, 6'1" in work boots. He'd been eating quietly the whole time, and now he was standing between Rex and me with his hands at his sides. Not aggressive, not theatrical, just there. "Uncle Rex." Jake's voice was the opposite of Rex's. Low, steady, unbothered. "Let her finish." Rex looked at Jake like he'd been slapped by a piece of furniture. In Rex's world, younger men didn't interrupt older men. It didn't compute. "This is none of your business, boy." "It's a family gathering," Jake said. "Seems like family business to me." Rex spun toward the crowd, arms wide, searching for backup. "Is nobody going to—" "This is my family. My house. My—" "Is it?" That was me. 2 words. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't need to. Rex stopped. The word "my" hung in the air between us like a challenge, and for the first time in my life, I watched my father hear it. Uncle Bill hadn't moved from his Adirondack chair. He was staring at Rex with an expression I'd never seen on him before. Not loyalty. Something closer to doubt. Donna had drifted backward, Prosecco abandoned on the table. She was standing near the side gate, clutching her car keys. Nobody was on Rex's side of the yard anymore. Not literally. People hadn't moved. But the gravity had shifted. 31 people were looking at my father, and for the first time, they weren't looking up. I turned to the 2nd page. "The next part," I said. "This is the part that's going to matter." I smoothed the 2nd page against my palm and read, "Myra, there's something about the house I need you to know. Your father has called it his for as long as you can remember. My roof. My rules. You've heard it 1,000 times. So has everyone else." I could see heads nodding slightly around the yard. They'd heard it too. But the house at 414 Maple Lane was purchased with $180,000 from my parents, your grandparents, David and Ruth Whitmore. It was their money, an early inheritance they gave me when your father and I were first married, because they wanted me to have something that was mine. I felt the stillness deepen. This wasn't the silence of shock anymore. This was the silence of something clicking into place. "The deed is in my name. Ellen Whitmore Harper. Your father's name has never been on it. He didn't pay for it. He didn't co-sign for it. It is not his house. It has never been his house." Rex's face went white. Not gradually, all at once, like a screen losing power. "I made a will." I continued reading. "A legal will, prepared by attorney Richard Avery and witnessed by my sister Carol. The house goes to you, Myra. It was filed and entered into probate after my death. By the time you read this, the title has already transferred." I reached into my other pocket and pulled out the 2 documents I'd brought, a photocopy of the recorded deed and a certified copy of the relevant page of my mother's will. I placed them on the table, face up, next to the quitclaim deed Rex had wanted me to sign. 3 pieces of paper. His lie next to her truth. Donna spoke first. She was still by the gate, car keys in hand, and her voice had the flat tone of a woman doing a title search in her head. "Rex, you told me the house was yours. Rex didn't look at her. It is my house. I lived here 30 years. Carol's voice came from behind me, steady as a closing statement. Living in a house doesn't make it yours, Rex. Paying for it does, and you didn't. Uncle Bill stared at the deed on the table. He didn't touch it. He didn't speak, but his jaw was working like he was chewing through 30 years of conversations that had just changed meaning. Rex stood in the middle of his own backyard barbecue, surrounded by 31 people who'd come for hot dogs, and he had nothing left to say. His hand, the one that had pointed at me, grabbed for my letter, held his beer like a scepter, was shaking. I didn't need to yell. The deed spoke louder than anything I could have said. There's more, I said. I didn't say it loudly. I said it the way you say the labs came back to a patient's family when the news isn't over yet. I turned back to my mother's letter. Before I died, I read, I discovered something that made me realize I couldn't leave this to chance. Your father applied for a second mortgage on our home, a home he does not own, through First Regional Bank. The loan officer called our family attorney because Rex's name wasn't on the deed. The application was denied. I looked up. Rex was staring at me like I was reading his autopsy report while he was still alive. That's when I knew, I read. That's when I called Carol. That's when we went to see Richard Avery and made everything official. The will. The trust. This letter. Because if your father would try to borrow against a house he doesn't own while I was alive, I had no doubt he'd try to take it from you after I was gone. I set the letter down. The yard processed it in waves. First, the closer relatives. Uncle Bill pressing his fingers to the bridge of his nose, Cousin Patty whispering something to her husband. Then the outer ring. The neighbors exchanging glances, the church ladies going very quiet. And then, Donna. She was already halfway through the gate, but she stopped and turned back. Her voice had lost every trace of that warm, soothing, open house cadence. Rex, did you try to mortgage a house that wasn't yours? Baby, I can explain. I'm a real estate agent, Rex. She held her car keys like a verdict. I know what fraud looks like. The gate clicked shut behind her. A moment later, an engine turned over in the driveway and tires rolled across gravel, and Donna Kessler was gone. Rex watched the gate for a long 3 seconds. Then he sat down in his lawn chair like somebody had cut his strings. There was 1 page left. I almost didn't read it. The first 2 had done the work. The facts, the evidence, the architecture of a lie dismantled in public. But the last page wasn't about property or mortgages. It was about something harder. My hands trembled for the first time all afternoon, not from fear, from grief. I have one more thing to say, I read, and this one is for me, not for him. The crowd didn't move. Somewhere on the next block someone set off a bottle rocket. It whistled and popped, and nobody flinched. I spent 30 years married to your father, and I never once said no to him. I never argued. I never raised my voice. I never left, even when I should have. I told myself it was for you, that I was keeping the family together. But the truth is, I was afraid. My voice cracked. I let it. The thing I'm most ashamed of, the thing that keeps me up at 3 a.m. when the pain medication wears off, is that every time he yelled at you instead of me, some part of me was relieved. And then I hated myself for it, every single time. Cousin Patty was crying. She wasn't the only one. Uncle Bill stood from his chair, walked to the edge of the patio, and stopped there with his back to everyone, hands in his pockets, head down. I can't change what I did and didn't do, I read. But I can give you what I never had. The house is yours. The trust Carol helped me set up. $220,000. That's yours too. That's my apology and my love in the same envelope. I read the last line slowly, because my mother had underlined it twice. You were not an accident, Myra. You were the thing I fought hardest for. Don't be afraid to say what I never could. You are allowed to say no. I folded the letter. 3 sheets of cream stationery, back into the envelope, back into my pocket against my heart. Rex sat in his lawn chair with his 6th beer leaking onto the grass beside him, surrounded by 31 people who could no longer look him in the eye. He didn't say a word. For a long moment, the only sounds were the flag 2 houses down and a dog barking somewhere on the next street. The grill was still smoking. The food was still out. The string lights my mother had hung were starting to glow against the early evening sky. Nobody left. Nobody spoke. It was like the whole yard was holding its breath, waiting to find out what kind of family they were going to be now. Rex looked around. He turned his head slowly, searching for the faces that had always been on his side. The people who'd nodded when he said my house, who'd laughed when he said I wanted a son, who'd texted me to call him more. Nobody met his gaze. The second cousin who'd murmured poor Rex 10 minutes earlier was sitting with her plate in her lap, staring at the grass. Her eyes were red. Rex tried. "You're all going to believe a dead woman over me?" It landed like a stone in a pond. Ripples, then silence. Nobody answered. Jake said from the picnic bench without heat, "We're going to believe a notarized will and a property deed, Uncle Rex." Carol walked forward, stopping beside me. She didn't touch me, but I could feel her steadiness like a wall. "Rex," she said, "Richard Avery has all the original documents. I'd suggest you contact your own attorney." A pause. "You're going to need one." I gathered the papers from the table. The deed, the will, the unsigned quitclaim, and stacked them neatly. I tucked the letter back into my scrub pocket. I pushed in my chair. Then I said the last thing I was going to say to my father at that table. "I'm not selling this house. I'm not signing anything. And I'm not asking for your permission." I looked at him once more. The man in the lawn chair, in the yard he didn't own, holding the authority that no longer worked. He looked smaller than I'd ever seen him. Not pitiable, just accurately sized, for the first time. I walked out through the side gate. Carol and Jake followed. Behind me, 31 people sat with their paper plates and their sparklers and the ruins of a story they'd believed for 30 years. Here's what happened next, because I know you're wondering. Richard Avery sent a formal letter to Rex the following Monday. Certified mail, return receipt requested. It stated, in plain legal language, that the property at 414 Maple Lane was owned by Myra Ellen Harper, pursuant to the last will and testament of Ellen Whitmore Harper, that the decedent's estate had been fully administered through probate, and that Rex A. Harper was occupying the property without legal right. He was given 60 days to vacate. Standard. By the book. No theatrics. Rex didn't hire a lawyer. I don't think he could afford one. The credit card debt alone was $38,000. I learned this later from Uncle Bill, who'd seen a statement on Rex's kitchen counter. Add the auto loan on the Dodge Ram, plus whatever he'd spent on the Weber Grill and Donna's dinners, and the life of a man pretending to be richer than he was, and there was nothing left. The house he'd tried to sell, estimated at $280,000 by Donna's own market analysis, had never been his to sell. The second mortgage he'd tried to take out had been denied because his name wasn't on the deed. The quitclaim deed he'd tried to get me to sign would have been the only way to make any of it work, and I hadn't signed it. His entire plan had depended on one thing, his daughter being too afraid to say no. Donna stopped answering his calls within a week. Blocked his number by the end of the month. I have no ill will toward Donna. She was looking for a man with assets, and Rex had presented himself as one. That's not love, but it's also not my problem. The trust my mother had set up held $220,000, enough to pay off my student loans, establish an emergency fund, and still have money left over for the future. My mother had planned this from a hospital bed. While Rex was in the garage polishing his truck, she was in the kitchen with Carol, building a firewall out of ink and notary stamps. Uncle Bill called me 2 weeks after the barbecue. I was sitting on the porch of the Maple Lane house, my house, drinking coffee and watching the hydrangeas catch the morning light, and his name appeared on my phone. My first instinct was to let it ring. The last time Bill had reached out, it was to call me selfish and send me an article about bad daughters. I picked up anyway. He was quiet for a long time. Then, "I owe you an apology, kid." I waited. I believed everything he told me, that you wouldn't visit, that you didn't care, that he was doing this all on his own. A pause. I just found out from Carol that you were the only one who took your mother to chemo, every appointment, for over a year. And Rex told me, he looked me in the eye and told me, that you refused to help. I closed my eyes and felt the familiar ache of a lie that had done its damage long before the truth arrived. He told me a lot of things, Bill said. About the house, about your mother, about everything. And I believed him. Because he's my brother. And I'm sorry. Thank you, Uncle Bill, I said. That means more than you know. He cleared his throat. One more thing. A few months back he asked me to co-sign a personal loan, $20,000. I said no because it didn't feel right. A tired laugh. I guess now I know why. Before he hung up, he said the thing that mattered most. Your mom would have been proud of you, Myra. I sat on that porch for a long time after that call. I moved back into the house on Maple Lane at the end of August, after Rex's 60 days were up. He'd already gone by the time I arrived with my boxes. He'd left the place cleaner than I expected. The kitchen wiped down, the garbage taken out. Whether that was guilt or pride, I'll never know. Maybe some combination that Rex would never have the vocabulary to explain. The lazy boy was gone. He'd taken it with him. The one piece of furniture in the house that was indisputably his. The living room looked bigger without it. Brighter. I donated the spot to a reading chair I found at the same estate sale circuit my mother used to love. The first thing I did was hang the wedding photo back up. I'd found it in the garage, in a box labeled Donate in Rex's handwriting. The photo, my mother's winter coat, some books she'd loved and, at the very bottom, wrapped in a dish towel, the Chanel No. 5. The bottle was nearly empty. I set it on the vanity where it had always been. Carol came over that first evening with a tray of lasagna and a bottle of wine that cost more than anything Rex had ever put on the table. We sat at the kitchen counter and didn't talk much. We didn't need to. Jake helped me carry boxes upstairs. He didn't say anything profound. He just pointed at the master bedroom door and said, "You taking that room?" And I said, "Yeah, I think I am." That night, I sat at my mother's vanity for the first time. I looked at myself in the oval mirror she'd looked into every morning for 30 years. I placed the letter on the vanity, leaning against the mirror. Then I went outside and watered the hydrangeas. I lived in my mother's house. Not my father's house. Hers. And now mine. Sometimes I wonder what would have happened if I'd signed that paper at the barbecue. If I'd folded the way he expected. The way my mother always had. If I'd become her for one more generation. And then I think, she wrote that letter so I wouldn't have to be. She spent her last good months making sure I'd have the ground to stand on and the proof to back it up. Is there someone in your life you've been afraid to say no to? Someone who's been telling your story for you, louder than you can tell it yourself? I'd love to hear about it in the comments. 6 months after the barbecue, I got an update on Rex from Uncle Bill. He'd moved into Bill's spare bedroom. He was working extra shifts at the auto parts store. Still assistant manager. Still resentful about it, but now without the safety net of a house he'd never owned to fall back on. Bill said Rex spent most evenings in the spare room watching TV on a small screen he'd brought from Maple Lane. He didn't talk much about the barbecue. He didn't talk much about anything. Donna had blocked him on everything. Phone, email, social media. She'd moved on to a new listing and, presumably, a new man with a verified deed. I can't say I blamed her. Rex hadn't called me. Not once in 6 months. I hadn't called him either, but I wanted to be clear about something. I didn't tell him he could never reach out. I didn't slam a door. I said what I'd needed to say, and then I waited. If he calls, I told Carol one Sunday over coffee, I'll answer. But he has to start with the truth. The real truth, not the Rex Harper version. Carol nodded. And if he doesn't call? Then that's his choice. I meant it. I was at peace with both outcomes. The one where my father found the courage to be honest for the first time in his life, and the one where he didn't. Either way, I was standing in my own house, paying my own bills, sleeping in a room where the vanity smelled like Chanel No. 5, and nobody was going to hand me a pen and tell me to sign away what my mother had given me. People ask me if it was worth it. The confrontation, the letter, the barbecue. They want to know if I feel vindicated, if revenge tastes as good as they say. Here's what I'll tell you. I didn't do it for revenge. I didn't stand up at that table because I wanted to humiliate my father. I stood up because my mother asked me to. Not in those words, but in every word she wrote in that letter. She asked me to be the woman she couldn't be, and the smallest thing I could do to honor that was to open my mouth when she would have closed hers. My mother lived 30 years in fear. She cooked his meals and folded his shirts and sat in the passenger seat of her own life. And the one thing she couldn't forgive herself for was that she let him aim his anger at me because it meant he wasn't aiming it at her. She wrote that in the letter. She didn't dress it up or make excuses. She just said it, plainly, the way she should have been able to say everything. I don't hate my father. I want to be clear about that. Hate takes energy I'd rather spend on 12-hour shifts and hydrangea bushes and Sunday dinners with Carol and Jake. What I feel for Rex is something quieter and more precise. A recognition that he is a man who was given a family and treated it like a possession. And when the receipts came out, he had nothing in his name. I learned something that 4th of July. Boundaries aren't selfish. Silence isn't always peace. And the people who tell you to keep the family together are usually the ones who aren't being torn apart by it. My mother taught me all of this. She just had to die first to say it out loud. And I think that's the part that hurts the most. This morning, before my shift, I went out to water the hydrangeas. It was early, 6 a.m., the light still thin and blue, the street quiet. I stood in the yard in my bare feet the way my mother used to, stepping over the second and third porch boards out of habit, even though I'd fixed them both in September. She planted those bushes the first spring after they moved in. Rex wanted to pull them out, said they took up too much of the yard, that he wanted space for a grill and a horseshoe pit. My mother said no. One of the only times she did. She stood in the garden with dirt on her knees and a trowel in her hand and said, "These stay." And they stayed. For 30 years, through every argument and every silence, and every time Rex said my house in front of company, those hydrangeas kept blooming, blue and purple and stubborn and alive. I think about that a lot. How my mother lost almost every battle in that marriage except the flowers. How she picked the one thing she was willing to fight for and held onto it with both hands in the dirt. She couldn't keep herself safe, but she kept the hydrangeas, and she kept the deed, and she kept the letter. I turned off the hose and stood in the yard. My yard. The house glowed white behind me in the early light. If you asked me whether what I did was revenge, I'd say no. It wasn't revenge. It was a promise my mother made me keep. I think she'd like that. That's my story. Thank you for staying until the end. I know it was a long one, and I know some parts were hard to hear. They were hard to tell. If anything in this story felt familiar, if you've sat at a table where someone tried to make you small, if you've held a pen over a paper you knew you shouldn't sign, if you've loved someone who couldn't protect you and forgave them anyway, I'd like to hear about it. The comments are open, and I read everyone. If this story meant something to you, please take a moment to hit like and subscribe. Not for the algorithm, for the next person who needs to hear that it's okay to say no to someone who raised you. And if you haven't had enough yet, there's another story linked in the description about a woman whose family tried to erase her seat at the Thanksgiving table. She didn't have a letter from her mother. She had something else. I think you'll want to hear how that one ends. I'm Myra. I'm 28. I'm an ICU nurse, and I live in my mother's house on Maple Lane, where the hydrangeas bloom every summer whether anyone gives them permission or not.